So we rank a Phantom's performance on a scale of 1 through 5 Phantom half masks, or 0 to 2.5
full masks,
whole man face masks.
Yes.
So I think what's been called into question is, we call it a half mask, but in reality, it is that Phantom's whole mask.
Yes.
Is half of a standard mask. But if I were to order a half dozen donuts, I wouldn't be missing half of my product. My whole would be 6, but we call it a half dozen of donuts.
Yes.
And the same logic applies to masks. So that means one half mask is the equivalent of 6 donuts. So the most donuts you can get when ranking.
This is a very helpful clarification.
I hope this helps.
He's big braining it, okay? If you don't get it, I don't know what to tell you.
One Phantom half mask equals 6 donuts.
Yes.
So the most donuts you can get in the Phantom of the Podpra donut rankings is 30 donuts?
But luckily,
okay.
Luckily for you all at home, you type in half mask to donut conversion in whatever search engine you got, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Hey, everybody. We are live, and we are here to talk about the Pee Wee as Himself documentary. And it's a spooky crew of people that are talking about this, mostly because Pee Wee is a little scary and a whole lot of campy. So let's bring out the rest of our panel here. We've got the Jersey Ghouls themselves, Marissa and Jacki.
Hey, Mechaleka, hey, everybody.
Mechaleka, heiny ho, everybody. And of course, to complete the trifecta, who's been awake for way too many hours on West Coast time, Joshua of Fright School.
Hi, kids. Yay. I can't do a Pee Wee voice. I was like, maybe you should just go for it, but you didn't practice that, so don't do it. Yeah, see, I can't.
Of course, you're the closest.
All right.
I worked on it all night.
All my life. All my life. It's not for sale, Francis. So let's start here. We're all big Pee Wee fans, right? This was none of our first experience dipping our toe into the world of Pee Wee Herman.
No, definitely not.
No.
So
I think that's why it makes sense. We're all the spooky horror people, because this is what was wrong with us. This is how we got this way.
Listen, Large Marge is a huge chunk of kinder trauma for most people. And I think about it in the sense of, when I was a kid, it's wild to me that it took me years to want to rent a horror movie because I was scared of horror movies, because I had a single VHS tape that I just watched on a loop, when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, and it was just Pee Wee's Big Adventure, the Winnie the Pooh, the hour-long Winnie the Pooh movie from Disney, followed by Beetlejuice, and I would just watch those 3 things, rewind, and watch again. And I obviously, because I loved Pee Wee's Playhouse, I loved all of those things. But you're right, this is weirdly this is the perfect gateway to horror, because it's not horror, but it definitely has enough moments that will scare a child. like the Large Marge thing, I think everyone brings up, but honestly, for me, it was the clown hospital dream. Fucked me up way more as a kid.
Mixing in the Danny Elfman music with the clown imagery, it was that to me that was scarier than Large Marge
for sure. And the devil and the flames flying up and everything. It's so scary. But we were all I think all of us can say we were excited for this documentary, which people have been talking about. This played at film festivals. I think over a year ago was when the news dropped of Pee Wee comes out of the closet in this documentary, which I think we all kind of had our suspicions, but to make it official. Now, what I think all 4 of us have already said we were shocked by was the length of the documentary, that we were signing up for 3.5 hours roughly of Pee Wee information. When did each one of us watch this? We'll start with you, Joshua.
Yeah.
I watched them because I did go in thinking it was just because, the way they build it. I don't know. I didn't see any of the 2-part thing. So I just thought it was 2 hours. So I was like, okay, well, we'll sit down Saturday. We'll watch it. That'll give me enough time to kind of process my feelings about it and figure out what the hell I'm going to say. And I'm like, oh, no, it's almost like 4 hours and I don't have time. So I had to get up very early this morning. I got up at 6:30 so that I could watch the rest of it. So it's very like raw, fresh, especially, well, we'll get into it. But the second half deals with things that are very like personally important to me and to cultural conversation. So yeah, that's when I watched it.
Let's
So
hit
very
you,
raw.
Jackie. We'll go.
I watched part 1 last night and part 2 this morning.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
But I also don't ever sleep anymore. Like I usually wake up around like 3 a.m. and I'm just up. So I was like, I had no worries. I was like, I knew I was going to watch it in time. So yeah.
Yeah. Marissa?
Well, first I have to say, hey, Mom, because she's watching and she was definitely my gateway to Pee Wee. And I watched it all last night. And I have to say, I spent a solid couple hours afterwards being like, no, I can't talk to anybody right now. Like I was just so profoundly emotionally moved. So I toggled between not being able to talk and then spending the rest of the evening and this morning being Pee Wee to my family. And let me tell you that they've loved it, I'm sure. I know that hasn't gotten old for anybody, but I'm sure they're so glad I'm back in I know you are, but one of my face.
This dropped Friday at 8 p.m. East Coast time, and Barb took her kids to bed at that exact same time, and I laid in bed and watched both parts in one long sitting. Just because similarly, I'm like, we have the kids all weekend. I don't know when I'm gonna like find time to watch this as a 2-parter. So like, let's just take advantage. And when I wake up at 5:30 in the morning tomorrow, that'll be tomorrow. That's problem. And I agree with everybody. Like, it's really good. It doesn't. I mean, I'm not gonna say it doesn't feel like it's 4 hours long because it does. But we were saying before we hit record, like I'd be hard pressed to point to anything that I'd be like, oh, I mean, they could have cut that and trimmed this down. Like, it's all pretty interesting information. It's a lot of. I like that the whole first half of this is just getting us to Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right? Like we have like a full hour and a half of like the struggle, the bit parts, the creation of the character finding the footing, no one believing in the character. Like it is broken into like the struggle for fame. And then part 2 is kind of like the trappings of fame, right? Like it's kind of, it's a very well broken out part. And another thing that we mentioned before we officially kicked off the live stream that I think we should all discuss is that this isn't exactly like a lot of these documentaries are just like 2 hours of like, isn't this person so great? Like, isn't this just the best person? And they really are like, between just the interviews of him being difficult with the documentary filmmakers and the interviews with people from his past being like, yeah, he's a pain in the ass to work with. Like,
I think. Go ahead, Jackie.
So yeah, I will say that I left this experience feeling very conflicted. Like almost like a don't meet your heroes kind of thing. Because where I landed, and again, this is me completely and how my brain works, but Paul Rubens, the person, is not the person that was in my head, because like I love Pee Wee and I grew up loving Pee Wee. And for me, I expected the person who became, Pee Wee to be a certain way. And it's so unfair to Paul Rubens because I'm like, I don't want the guy that made something that means so much to me. Like, again, we're all self-centering this here. He's a dick.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
no.
and it's one of those things where it's like, but it's, at the same time, for me to perceive him as like, any other way, like he's human, he's flawed. Of course, it's not fair of me to expect this pedestal perfection again from somebody that created a character that's so important to me. So how could he let me down by not being this like absolute, and it has absolutely nothing to do with any of the legal stuff that he went through. just, watching the stuff when they talked about, with Phil Hartman.
The Phil Hartman stuff crushed me.
Like, it just kind of made me mad that I'm like, Pee Wee, the guy that made Pee Wee wouldn't be that big of a dick. Like, yeah, and him being difficult in the interviews. I will say that I leave this still loving Pee Wee more than ever. And again, also having not even the slightest inclination of what it was like to be, Paul Rubens through his whole life. I mean, yes, he did have more of a privileged upbringing. He had extremely supportive parents and his sister. Like, he had that. Not to say that he didn't have struggles, because of course he did, but I don't know. Like, I leave it being slightly, my opinion, I don't even want to say my opinion, but I do walk away just slightly like, okay, he's more human than I think my brain wanted him to be. And, it doesn't make me love Pee Wee any less. It would never make me, not want to support anything that I would, see him in or whatever. But it was just, it was a little bit jarring for me, only because I just expected in my brain for him to be a particular way. And he wasn't. He was a human with flaws and complications.
I think what jumps to my mind when you're saying that is, like, you hear stories all the time about how, like, Bill Murray is very difficult to work with. But I think that because Bill Murray plays so many difficult, obnoxious characters, you're just like, well, of course that's what Bill Murray's like.
Yeah.
But Paul Rubens, it's different, right? Like, it's like, well, he doesn't typically play characters that are like difficult assholes. He plays annoying characters for sure.
I was just gonna say, time out. Is the premise that Pee Wee's not kind of an asshole?
Pee Wee is a brat.
He's a brat. That is true.
Like, I don't accept this premise.
But I do.
I love about Pee Wee.
But I do agree with you that, like, the Phil Hartman stuff specifically, it seems like I can truly 100% understand Pee Wee being a bit of Paul being a bit of a dick to the documentary filmmakers. And I can understand that basically anything that happens post his arrest in the early 90s, he is constantly on the defensive that any new people entering his orbit are people that may not have his best intentions in mind, and that he's like super guarded from that. But to be the way that he was towards people who were with him from the very beginning, and to like have that jealousy and frustration when he himself is also successful, like that's the part that like is really stressful, like or upsetting. Is like Pee Wee was already a huge established thing when Phil Hartman got Saturday Night Live. So to like be jealous that this other person who's been in the shadows helping you create this character is finally getting in the spotlight, when your biggest complaint is that Paul Rubens is always in the shadow of Pee Wee Herman, like it seems kind of like very self-centered. There's a lot of like self-centered moments, I think.
So totally valid, you guys, and with no shock, I'm going to politely disagree.
Okay.
Because for me, I think I had a lot of like revelations about my relationship with Pee Wee through this documentary. I almost didn't even think as much into this as I should have as a kid, or even as a younger adult. Because first of all, it's totally okay to be a dick when you're funny about it. I mean, that's what I've lived my whole life telling myself. But like, I thought that one of the things I loved about how much of a control freak he was that he was completely self-aware and being kind of ironic about it. And one of the most poignant things to me was that like he did want to direct, and they were constantly making that battle for power, and he did acquiesce to the fact that you can't portray yourself, you can't direct the story of your own life, you don't really get who you are, and that's a tough pill for any of us to swallow. And for me, seeing that asshole side of him, and forgive my French, I think made it so much more like, it just made me love him that much more, because I think growing up, I think Pee Wee, if nothing else, taught me it was okay to be nonconformist. It was okay to be a thing that was slightly annoying and maybe wasn't for everybody, because that's the kid I was. And then as an adult watching this, I'm like, see, I don't know. I never resented the fact that he was a dick in real life. I think I just loved that he has come to terms with who he is and his journey, and this idea of like, this was my performance side of myself that I was putting forth for the public, and then there was this real side, and not many people knew that or got to see that. And I think that journey just really resonated with me and made me just fall in love with him and all of the characters, and my journey with them personally even more.
Yeah. I do love the level of loyalty that he had to other people, like the person who designed the poster for the Pee Wee Herman show, and how he constantly was like, "No, this is the guy who gets Pee Wee. He's the person who gets to design the playhouse.
Right.
He's the guy who gets to do this." Like,
or that representation mattered to him, but he never flaunted it. Like, look at me, I'm the marginalized, the voice of the marginalized. Like, here he was recloseting himself in order to put this character forth and putting representation in there in a way that we had never seen. And it just was so casual. Like, I never thought twice about him wearing high heels in Pee Wee's Playhouse. And there was something so beautiful about all that. And I don't know. Yeah, I love that. I thought there was a selflessness to him that came through, even though he was such a dick to the director. I would have cried if I was the director.
I feel like I felt the first time that he was difficult with the director, I thought it was very funny, where he like comes out about being gay, and then he's like, "But is that true? I don't know. Do you think it's true?" Like
maybe.
Every time, even when it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Even when it was abusive, it was a little funny.
But all right, Josh, how about you?
I mean, you know, I can see where Jacki is definitely coming from. I also think that's kind of the point of the documentary, right? It's like, I'm a person. Like, I don't see it so much that he was like totally a dick, you know, again, creative types, people who like true visionaries, right? Like, you have to be so committed to like your vision and your dreams. You have to believe in yourself, you know, and we can count, I'm sure all of us can think of 20, 30 celebrities that, you know, kind of represent that. Madonna, you should not be making your own movie. Sorry, I just have to say that. For these same reasons, you know, of like why he shouldn't be, you know, making a documentary. But there's also just part of me too. Like, I love these kinds of documentaries. I love looking at the complexities. I love those kinds of reveals. You know, people, you know, oh, why are you a therapist? Oh, I want to help people. No, I'm a chismosa. Like, I'm nosy. Tell me all.
Amen.
Tell me all the bad stuff too. Tell me all the gray stuff. Tell me all the ways that you think you failed in life. You know, all of these like, you know, spaces. So I don't know. I thought I really liked that it wasn't trying to be a character. It wasn't a redemptive kind of thing, you know. I mean, it's there. There's definitely, you know, if people watch this with open hearts and open minds who still kind of, you know, brand him with the P word and still think of him in that way, there's a lot here worth taking in and accepting in a really profound way for all of us, and to take into anybody you meet, just remembering that they're people, you know. I mean, think about it. Think about all the like terrible moments, or think about the people that you didn't mean to hurt in your life, but you did. If they all got together and did a documentary.
Yeah.
That's my thought. Documentary about me. Like, there's going to be like, well, you know, there was this one time in college.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't come away with a conflicted feeling. I came away with the feeling of like, yeah, he's a person and somebody that I wasn't ever all that curious about behind the scenes, and now I want to know even more. So yeah, I wish that he had written like a memoir or bio or something, which I don't think he did. Right? I mean, this is kind of that. It's a visual.
This is his memoir. I mean, someone who did write a memoir and shows up pretty frequently throughout this documentary is, of course, Elvira herself. I know. I knew about that. I mean, she brings up a lot of her time in the Groundlings in her own memoir, and her love of working with Pee Wee and John, or Paul and John. I keep calling him Pee Wee. It's very disrespectful.
That's the thing, though. Like, that's kind of the point.
I mean, isn't that what he wanted? I mean, he had said, you know, that was true. He wanted Paul to kind of fade away, so he knew that the star could rise with Pee Wee. I think that's why we all, you know, well, we'll get to it.
I do love the logic that he presents of the name Pee Wee Herman, where he's like, I just thought that no one would think it was a stage name, because if you could pick a stage name, you would pick a better stage name. It's like the layers of brilliance in that is like really funny. So I definitely would have. I mean, we get almost an hour of his time at the Groundlings and him doing the Gong Show, and honestly, I could have done with another hour of it. Like, that whole part was so fascinating, and seeing all the different ways that he would like try these different characters in different areas, just to see like what's the one that's going to like stick And I love the idea that he didn't think Pee Wee was going to be that at first.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it wasn't the other character he thought it would work. Which is
Yeah.
him playing a Native American
Native
character.
Yeah, jeez.
That was by far the most uncomfortable I was.
Yeah, there were definitely some cringe moments that didn't have anything to do with him. Just
Yeah.
the time.
The
period.
time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh,
And he's
God.
acknowledged.
Show
I mean,
in general.
yeah, he acknowledges that too, though. He's like, thank God that was like not the character that took off. Like, and yeah, like
Can
just
we
doing all
talk-
the Cheech and Chong stuff, like the stuff that he was able to do before anybody knew who he was is still like. It's funny that like the stuff that he was able to do pre-Pee Wee is still like, if that happened to any one of the four of us, we'd be like, well, these are the career highlights of my life. I was in a Cheech and Chong movie. I appeared on the Gong Show. Like,
I have to just circle back before we leave this era to the dating game, because I really, guys, speaking of therapy and chismosa, I need to understand how in any world a girl has 3 contestants, one of whom is Paul Rubens as Pee Wee Herman, and she chooses Pee Wee. Like, I don't
Because
understand.
he makes you laugh.
yeah.
He seems
He
fun.
makes
I'm like,
you
yeah.
laugh. He has good answers. He makes you laugh when you can't see them. I think I would have done the same thing. I probably would have picked contestant number 3.
And he's not like locked
You're
into that
off my
Pee Wee
toes.
voice just yet in that either. You know what I mean? Like he's not
It's true.
like he's still a little bit Paul, but like while dressed as Pee Wee in that dating game show. I don't know if she would have picked him if the whole time he was doing like, I know you are, but what am I? like that may not have worked out as well. But I think that was also him being smart of like, all right, let's not push the character so far that it doesn't feel believable just yet. Like this has to feel real enough.
Just and the opportunity to like workshop the beginnings of Pee Wee
Yeah.
on the dating game.
On the
is
dating
bananas.
game.
On the dating game is
Yeah.
bananas.
Well, and then like they didn't really get too deep into this element, and maybe it's because it's incorrect information, but like 2 things that they covered in this first part that I thought, oh, why aren't we mentioning this? Was I always was under the impression that similarly to how Elvira was like, let's take this horror character, but give her a Valley Girl personality. I always thought that was the same with Pee Wee, that Pee Wee had, especially in his early, like showing up on David Letterman days, that he had this Valley Girl-esque ism to the way he would talk. Like he would always have like the, like, you know, and like, while he, like I've seen, there's one bit, which I was so bummed they didn't play it because it's my favorite Pee Wee bit, where he tells a very long story about a guy who gets hired to ring a bell at a school by smashing his face against the side of the bell. And the big punchline is it's like a 5-minute story about this guy. He walks up this flight of stairs every single day and he bangs his face against the bell, gong. And then one day he slips and he falls and a crowd forms and someone's yelling, "Who is it? Who is it?" And someone says, "I don't know his name, but his face rings a bell." Perfect. But also they never mentioned the bicycle thief, which I was under the impression was like all of what Pee-wee's Big Adventure is based off of. Like if you watch the French film from the 40s, The Bicycle Thief, it is like scene by scene the same movie.
Well, I'd hardly say it's scene by scene the same movie.
What, you don't remember the clown nightmare scene in The Bicycle Thief?
No.
I must have missed the dinosaurs in the original Bicycle Thief. Well, one of the things about this early time too is like, I don't know about you guys, but I had an aha moment about how children who grew up in our generation grew up with way more performance artists than we ever realized. Like I look at kids today and like even the generation, damn millennials below us, like I feel like at the end of the day, we grew up with like Lucille, because I watched tons of like Nick at Night, Lucille Ball style stuff, and like, you know, Pee Wee and these performers who were very much more fringe than, and I guess one of the things I said last night to my husband was, wow, it makes sense that we showed our kids like Yo Gabba Gabba and stuff that was more like fringe and esoteric and also made for adults, because that is the healthy diet we got. And I got to tell you, I think we're better for it. I think these kids growing up on really safe, really like, this is my character. I'm, you know, Miss Rachel, but really I'm just this adorable. Like, that doesn't work for me. I want hardcore fringe.
Well,
adult comedy.
I
in
think
my
it's
child.
two sides, right? It's either, I mean, there's always the outliers. There's always Bluey or something like that, where it's like, oh, we're going to talk about some heavy ass adult shit that the parents are going to start crying while watching, and the kids will be completely unaffected by. Or like, look, I got nothing against Miss Rachel, but you're right. There's either the super safe stuff, or the next evolution from that safe stuff is like YouTube commentators, which are also like not what I'm saying. I agree with you, basically. Now, there is an argument that the YouTube commentators is its own unique form of performance art, for sure. But I don't think the keyword that you threw there was like esoteric, which it's certainly not. like most of the YouTube commentators are like, I've created this really annoying character, and I'm going to sit in front of the camera and bitch about things on the internet in this annoying character. And it's not as whimsical as a Yo Gabba Gabba or a Pee-wee's Playhouse. I mean, especially when they started, we can jump ahead, I guess, to part 2 for a second, but like when they start showing the Pee-wee's Playhouse stuff, I really forgot how frenetic that show is comparatively to the other things on Saturday morning. Like just those opening credits, it is moving a mile a minute. You've got Cyndi Lauper singing this crazy theme song that's just describing
Shaw, you mean?
Sorry. Just describing every single character in the show, but it is like cut, quick. Like everything is just like so fast and crazy in a way that like it is the opposite of, say, another person I love, Mr. Rogers, where Mr. Rogers was so focused on like intentionally slow, quiet, calm moments. This is like as the antithesis of that is humanly possible. But I think they both kind of served the same message of you're great just the way you are. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just through different lenses.
I feel like that describes you really well, Matt. Like,
oh, thank you.
Mr. Rogers meets Pee-wee. But there is this like this deep, kind, compassionate, but that energy that you have is just, I mean, I don't know, unmatched. I'm always jealous. I'm like, gosh, I wish I had the energy of Matt today. But I did, one of the last notes I wrote just to comment on what we were talking about of the first part was no one takes chances like this anymore. Like meaning like studios or the people with money. It's like they want all this safe stuff. You would, you know, it's like there's so much important cultural stuff that came out of like what Paul Reubens did, what the Groundlings were doing, you know, Pee-wee. Like, I'm not like, you know, without Pee-wee, do we even get Elvira? You know, like somebody that could accept this kind of like, you know, or the way kind of Freddy Krueger became almost like a drag character, or, you know, Divine, you know, these sorts of people that, you know, held this really interesting space as like distinct personalities outside of the creators behind them. Like you just don't have that kind of stuff anymore, it feels. I mean, maybe I'm just like out of touch. I mean, maybe, but
I'm going to agree and disagree. Is I think that we're talking about like even a studio taking the risk on making a thing like Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I think that those things still get made, but they get dumped onto a streaming service or they get like a limited run. They don't get a like widescreen release on that level anymore. And I think part of it, this is going to sound like such an old man yelling at a cloud thing, but I think part of it is that there's so many options on how to watch a thing now. Like as opposed to like in the 80s, it was you went and you saw it in the movie theater and then like a year later you'd be able to rent it. Like because there's so many options, it becomes really easy to just like grab a thing that's a little weird and out there, but that you're not going to take the risk of trying to release it in theaters. You're just going to be like, all right, let's dump it on Prime or let's dump it on Hulu, and maybe the right crowd will find it and champion it and it'll like become a bigger deal. But you know, even like the weird movies that do get to come out in theaters, it's only the movies that are coming out through like an A24 or like a Blumhouse. Like you're not seeing like a Warner Brothers really just like attach their entire brand to an out there weird fucking concept with a bunch of first time untested people. You know what I mean? Like it's like Tim Burton directing a feature length film for the first time. Paul Reubens starring in a movie for the first time. The writers are 3 people who have never written a movie before in their life. Like you don't really get those moments anymore.
That's true. I was just thinking about Miranda Sings. That's kind of the last person I can think of that did such a thing, but she had millions of followers on YouTube. She built that herself. It's not like somebody invested in it, not to give her, too much space, but like that is kind of somebody that operates in that similar space. Sorry.
Yeah.
Marissa.
No, I think you're right. That's a great example, Josh. I think that the fringe is always going to exist and it's going to live in the fringe. And it is such an ebb and flow to when society will let it kind of eke into the mainstream. And I think we see this like every now and again with things like Pee Wee Herman and Yo Gabba Gabba and stuff like that, where things that would be considered too weird and almost too adulty for the mainstream become the mainstream. And I think that we're in a moment where I'd like to think we're on the precipice of it. Something big is going to come through again, if nothing else because of the socio-political moment that we're in. I think we are hungry for this. I think we are tired of our big franchises, and I love my big franchises, but I think we're ready for something like Pee Wee to come along again, and hopefully we'll see things like I do think things like A24 and stuff like that almost are also making it a little more palatable for the masses, but I think we're ready for the next big fringe star. I hope it comes soon.
It's why the 90s, I think, is such a beloved decade, is that is like one of the few times, especially it's one of the only times I think in our lifetime where the fringe stuff was also the cool stuff that was like making a shit ton of money. You know what I mean? Like you had grunge and Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith all kind of like not just coming out, but coming out and being like critically and commercially successful, which like is crazy. You know what I mean? Like that like a Quentin Tarantino movie is nominated up against like a big budget studio film like a Forrest Gump at the same time is like, okay, this is like a cool time period in our lives where like these things were kind of coexisting and being respected. And then it now is like very critically acclaimed and cool people know about it, but maybe once in a while something will be the big commercial hit, but not on the gauge that like 91 to 94 was, where like you could be as weird as you fucking want it to be and you could still be the number one film in the box office or the best-selling record that week.
Well, I think irony of ironies too is that so many fringe things have become the mainstream and become overplayed. Like I never thought being being a horror fan and a comic book fan would ever be so mainstream, and like little 12-year-old me could really use that win in her life, but like 30-40-year-old me was like, really? Now I can just buy a Chucky t-shirt at any store, and it took away the magic of it. It's like we didn't know what we wanted. But like capitalism ruined everything as per usual.
Well, that brings the point like Drag Race, because these are also characters, right? There are big characters that have kind of gone beyond like Trixie Mattel and and obviously RuPaul herself, but I think like Drag Race is kind of operating in that space too, in a way, where it's like who is the character and who's the actual person. Talking about like fringe things that are now mainstream, but sorry.
Well, I think that you also find that like it's weird in the current generation that we are, the best way to decide what is popular and what's connecting with people is how memeable is it, right? Like how often is that thing being reused for other purposes? And you mentioned like it is RuPaul's Drag Race, it's reality TV moments, it's Nathan Fielder and whatever the fuck he's doing at any given moment with his crazy mind. Or I just mentioned before we went live, I mentioned that tomorrow, I was telling Marissa tomorrow I'm going to go see Friendship, which is the new Tim Robinson movie. And like the way that the whole, I think you should leave, like, what even is this comedy? Like Tim Robinson's honestly kind of, I would say almost your modern Pee Wee Herman in the sense of just like, let's make annoying hilarious. Let's make an annoying asshole as funny as possible. And for those of you who don't know anything about I Think You Should Leave or Tim Robinson, he literally said that all of his sketches are based around the idea of him having kids who are under the age of 10 and writing sketches of what if adults behave the way that 10-year-olds behaved. And it's like, that is Pee Wee. Like, what if an adult acted like a toddler 24/7? And like, now that I live with a bunch of, kids between the ages of 2 to 10, like that age, kids are assholes. Like they are ego. They have no empathy. They're all ego, zero empathy. And like, that is what Pee Wee was. Like, it was like teaching Pee Wee about empathy every episode. That was like your basic I mean, I love the Christmas episode, and that is all the Christmas episode is about. It's like, stop being such a selfish asshole and shorten your Christmas list, you weirdo. like the fact that like Santa's like, yeah, I got all the gifts, but I'm not going to be able to give any of the other kids gifts, and Pee was just like, well, that's the same for them.
Yeah.
Like they have to like sit him down and explain to him why that's wrong, because like in his mind he's just like, well, I got what I want, great. Like,
that's fair. I could always use that reminder too. That's why I watch Pee Wee every year. I don't know. I think getting back to this whole issue, because one of the things that I think really did just get stuck in my head watching this whole thing is this idea of how much of us, especially as quote unquote performers, and I'll use that term very loosely for all of us, but
yeah.
I think, yeah, I have a persona that I put forth, and that's Marissa on air. And then there's real me. And there's even me, like, I don't know. I just feel like one of the things that really was poignant about this whole documentary for me was this idea of how much of our real selves does anyone ever really get to see. And why I was like so choked up by that very end of it was that I thought it was so, that last sound clip of him, just the audio was so raw. And granted, he was, unbeknownst to them, literally dying, but I think we got the most honest version of him as the documentary progressed. And I almost saw it physically. Like you could tell he was, I thought you could tell he was degraded. Like his physical health was getting worse throughout the documentary. And I think we just got to see the most stripped down, raw version of him. And I think we all had very different reactions to all of this. But I guess the question that's been living with me is like, how much of us do we ever how much of the true self do we ever put forward? And especially when it comes to things like our sexuality and our spirituality and all those bigger beliefs, like I think I am just Pee Wee Herman 90% of my life, and maybe like 10% of it I'm Marissa, you know? Like,
well,
I don't know.
Let's talk about where the documentary gets really hard, and that is discussing the two big legal situations that happen with Pee Wee. And both of them are like, you do even like the tiniest bit of research on them, and you're like, this is insane that either one of these even became a thing. But let's start with the first one, which is obviously the one that we all knew about as kids of the 80s and 90s, which is that Pee Wee Herman got arrested in a porno theater, supposedly masturbating. Now he denies that was the case, but one way or the other, even as a kid, I was like, well, what else would you do if you were going to one of those theaters? like that was always my mindset, even at like as like a preteen, being like, well, that's what those are for. What, like, do people just go and watch the movie?
Yeah.
But well, sorry, Jacki, it seemed like you were starting to say something.
No, I remember when it happened. I feel like my older brother probably fully explained it to me, because I was like, all right, yeah, he was in a theater. He was watching, like the stuff, the squiggly channel. He like like in my brain, I'm like, he
was
watched,
just a screen with like squiggles.
Like the squiggle people. No, like in my brain, like I think I was like, all right, he, like watched the Playboy channel, and I knew enough to know that, like, what happens when you watch that stuff. But I also remember thinking, like, I mean, I'm like, I don't care. Yeah. I'm like, it's Pee Wee. I'm like, who cares? I'm like, I do remember having that moment of shock of, that's when Pee Wee's not Pee Wee, that's what he looks like. And that was probably the first time that I learned his name's Paul Reubens. Like, seeing the real man behind the mask the first time, it was definitely a little bit jarring. But at the same time, like, I remember like processing it and being like, that really sucks. Like, is it a little icky? Like, I don't know. It's like, I wouldn't want to go to a theater and sit next to someone doing that. But in the 4 seconds it took to process all of that, it was like, okay, but this is Pee Wee. Like, let's scale the joy that he has brought to my life versus the unfortunate situation he's in. I'm like, I don't know. Like, free Pee Wee. Like, brought my brother and I, Brian and I, were very much like, it's Pee Wee. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. It's Pee Wee. We love Pee Wee no matter what.
Yeah. The one thing that does make me laugh, and it reminds me of something that happened in the last year, is, they have the direct quote, and they even mention it in the Living Color sketch where Jim Carrey is playing Pee Wee Herman trying to sell a doll. But he says, please don't release my name. It'll ruin my career. gave me a real "this is going to ruin the reunion tour" Justin Timberlake vibe a little bit, where it's like in retrospect, if Paul Rubens said nothing in that moment, it probably would have been fine. It was almost like in saying that he accidentally made the cops be like, wait, who is this guy? And like made them dive a little deeper. But I
The Barbara
love
Streisand effect.
yeah, but I love, and I will think about it forever now, when they tell the story that when he did Buffy the Vampire Slayer afterwards, his one request was that he look as close to his mugshot as possible in the movie. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, that is such a like, fuck you. I'm not going to let this define me. And I know that they always talk about, like, in the greatest MTV moments, they always talk about the brilliance of him just walking up to the microphone and saying, heard any good jokes lately, since he was like the punchline for so long. But I almost think that this is an even cooler fuck you moment of like, all right, now I'm going to be in a major motion picture looking as close to the mugshot as humanly possible and playing a villain. Like, that's pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah.
And how quaint this all is today. Like, looking at this in 2024, where we're watching the Diddy trial unfold and we're watching truly horrific Me Too men get what they have coming. I'm almost like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, and I was impressed with like 1991 society that there were so many people that came out in his, like, I didn't think to go grab a picket sign, but I was like, you go. Like, I don't know. It was such a quaint little moment. Like, victimless crime, who cares? Like, that's what people do there. And I was such a deviant.
I enjoyed when they were like, and he was made to pay a fine of $50.
$50.
Like, worth it.
$50 fine. Okay. Like, that just seemed almost comical to me, that like, because I feel like people are getting like the civil suits and millions of dollars, and I'm like, wow, I guess it was the kind of perspective where you have this celebrity like Paul Rubens getting a fine that I could pay that fine. Yeah. Like, I can totally afford to pay that. Like, I'm okay with that. I'll cut you a check, Pee Wee. I got you.
I got a speeding ticket leaving Creature Feature Weekend for almost $200. Oh. I would have dreamed for a $50 ticket in that situation.
So true.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to jump in just and say that you're right. I mean, I do think like there is a quaintness to like what he was doing, because I can't, like, what the hell? Like, that's what you do in these theaters. Who cares? It's so dumb. Yeah. It's this puritanical nonsense that we have. However, this has not gone away for queer people. Obviously, there is this inability when it comes to queer people, especially gay men, who are either doing drag or doing other things that, might involve children or might involve, something like family oriented, also being accepted as having like sex lives or having like a place where they can also cater to adults, and that's what this conversation is about, like drag story time, right? Meanwhile, Eddie Murphy or any million other guys that we grew up with, Robin Williams, I can think of a million other people who used drag as humor, who did that. Everybody thought that was perfectly fine. And then Eddie Murphy could go and do comedy shows about fucking this and fucking that and doing this drug and doing that drug. And then I'll do, some Disney movie. Like, we don't, like, this is still, like, that's one of the things that's sitting and watching this, that this is not something that has gone away. And then, of course, with the second charges of like, being in possession of, this is live, right? I probably should be careful what words we use, but CP, or whatever,
Yeah.
It's that still this inability to like extricate like queerness from like pedophilia, even though there's like, we could go on for days and days of statistics about who actually engages in this kinds of crimes and blah, blah, blah. But people just are very committed to these ideas. And it's kind of like, it was just very heartbreaking watching this, that it's that conversation is not going away. Trans women are a problem, right? In bathrooms. Since when do men need to pretend to be women to get away with violently assaulting women?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's insane. Like, you don't have to do that for our culture to be like, what was she wearing? Like, I mean, come on. So it's just, there was some stuff in this that was just very like personal to me, that there are people out there who will just make assumptions and who probably still believe this about him. Because even growing up, I remember when the first charge came out, because like Pee Wee Herman, I just don't have any memory of him not existing. Like, I'm pretty sure I was just sat in front of the TV and I just watched Pee Wee Herman for 5 years.
Yeah.
but it was like it sort of was like, oh, he was like in a theater, like, you know, I always thought it was like with children in like a public theater or something. You know, just the way they told the story, it made it sound so horrible. And then you're like, oh, he was in an X-rated theater, maybe jerking off allegedly. Like, who cares? You know, I don't know. It's just, I just had a lot of very personal reactions to it too. And just to see that we're not really beyond this when it comes to like queer people. But again, you know, Harvey White, well, he's not a good example, but he got away with it for a really long time.
He sure did. And I'm sure there's still plenty of them.
You know, I mean, Louis C.K., like his career seems to is recovering, you know, and plenty of people are still defending him, you know. So it's just like, I don't know. It's like, as long as you're straight, like, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're not wrong.
I'm still formulating. I just watched it an hour ago.
I know.
So I'm like angry.
I did get the impression that so much of that second thing was definitely a witch hunt, in that they were looking for things to get him on because of who he was and because of his lifestyle outside of Pee Wee. And that was infuriating. And especially now, while we're seeing so much just horrific, I think, slipping backwards in culture and conscious, that it's so important that we all just like, it was so heartbreaking to watch all of that. And like when they were showing some of the stuff that was very much a collection and very much, I liked all of the relevant information that was given about how like this was part of a giant collection and nothing in it was criminal by definition. And yet he still got charged for somebody's career, you know, like he still got charged because some jackass DA somewhere really wanted to make a name for himself and get reelected. And it was criminal what happened to him, truly, you know.
We love that, right? Oh, children's television show host.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, we just sells itself.
Truly.
Well, and I remember years ago, I don't think I remembered this event specifically happening. Like I remember learning about it much later, but like there was a quote that I remembered seeing about the person, because he would buy like bulk lots of random things.
Yeah.
And I just found it right here. And it was a quote from the person from one of his vintage magazine dealers where he bought the stuff. And he said that there was no way for Paul to even know what was in the contents of every page of those publications, and that Rubens only ever asked for physique and vintage 60s magazines. He never specified elements that would be inside the pages. So it's like, I think when I read it, it was like they combed through thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of magazines that he had collected and found like one magazine that had one questionable photo in it. And it's like, that is so outrageous that like it comes down to that. You know what I mean? Like that was just and that kind of was like the true end of his career. You know what I mean? Like the first thing with the porno theater, there was that bounce back, and he was still, you know, like Tim Burton threw him a bone with like a small part in Batman Returns, and he did Buffy, and he did Mystery Men. But this happened in like 2003, 2004, and I feel like you really didn't see Paul again for a long time until like the Netflix movie, when like Judd Apatow made like Pee-wee's Holiday, which was not nearly as good as the other ones.
See, I disagree. I think it's criminally underappreciated. I think it's 10 times better than the Big Top Pee Wee. Truly, I think if you put Holiday and Big Top together, just the Joe Michael jokes cracked me up for years. Like, I don't know. I think nobody appreciates Pee Wee's Big Holiday for how good it really is, and it was such a it's such a cute homage to. Well, can we talk about Big Top Pee Wee for a second? Why do I not remember that 20-minute kiss scene, and how funny is that? Like, I need to go watch Big Top Pee Wee 10 more times. But is it bad?
Did you fast forward through it each time? You're like, oh man, they're kissing for a long time. Ew, gross. I think I've
seen it maybe twice in my whole life. Like, truly. I don't know why.
Oh no, I watched that one a lot.
Did you? Oh, Big Adventure.
I did. Vance the Pig was my favorite. I thought he was such a hysterical character.
Yeah,
I remember it.
I was late to Big Top Pee Wee. I actually don't think I watched Big Top Pee Wee until Netflix was mailing discs in the mail, and I was like, "Oh, I've never seen Big Top Pee Wee," and I got that one in the mail, and it's fine. I mean, I own it on DVD. I don't know if that's like exactly the biggest thing to say in the world. I own a lot of shit, but I like it. Yeah, as you can see behind me. The collection just keeps growing. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's a reason why they didn't cover that particular film as extensively, and a big part of it was that people just did not connect to it the way that they did.
I think the criticism was valid that like
Yeah.
you took all the magic of Pee Wee and who he was. Like, yeah, like it's strange to see Pee Wee kiss someone. Like that's just not, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. I agree.
Minutes.
I agree with the criticism that like the magic of Pee Wee wasn't quite there. I think it was in a sense, but I think we were all so used to Pee Wee for so many years being a certain way that I think the phrase they used is they put Pee Wee in the real world, and it was very strange to see Pee Wee deal with much more real world situations, like the thing with the bike. I mean, obviously, yes, bikes get stolen. That's a thing that happens, but to go on this journey to find your bike personally, you know, most of us would report our bike stolen to the police and maybe it would get recovered. Like the fact that Pee Wee took the adventure on himself and he went to find his bike, you know,
literally went on a cross-country adventure to find his bike. Well, but you know, I'm gonna blame Paul Rubens a little bit at the same time, because I think that the other reason why Big Top Pee Wee didn't do as well is not that, and this is not to say that Paul doesn't know his own character. There's no one who knows that Pee Wee character better than, but what I gained from this documentary was that there was a lot of it sounds like he had resentment towards Phil Hartman for going off and doing SNL. He had resentment for Tim Burton getting as much attention for the movie as he did, and thus he made a movie without two of the people that helped formulate what Big Adventure was. He lost his co-writer and he lost his director. And you know, sometimes there is that very rarely can one person, and this is speaking for me, who's like a control freak like crazy, but like very rarely can a single person really steer the entire ship perfectly. But if you have people that you trust, like a Phil Hartman and a Tim Burton there, that like all have your ideas in the same mind, it just kind of feels like by the time Big Top Pee Wee came around, Paul really wanted to establish himself. So he it sounded almost like he hired a director who wasn't going to question him. And like, and without having any checks and balances, he kind of just made a perfectly fine, mediocre movie that doesn't have the magic that Big Adventure had, because it was a bunch of unique voices sharing unique ideas together and finding what was the best.
And I think he paid the price for it, right? I mean, you see his face, you see in the documentary, like, I just like my heart broke for him because he did do it all himself and it was a flop. And that sucks, you know, like, it just broke my heart for him. And he had it coming, but
if I could put anything else into this documentary, what I would really have loved, and I don't know, I honestly don't even know if this is the case or not, but it sounds like when Phil Hartman got SNL, that him and Phil basically never spoke again, right? I would love to have known, what was Paul thinking when Phil Hartman unexpectedly dies? Like, was there a feeling of like, shit, I can't believe I never fixed that friendship, or not? And like, I don't know. I think that there's something interesting to be told in that story alone. Like, was there a feeling of guilt that he held on to this kind of pointless grudge for so long that like now he'll never be able to like mend that fence? Like, I would love to have known that. I would have loved to have known his feelings in that sense. But by the time we get to the second half of the documentary, it feels like if the guard was like here leading up to Big Adventure, it feels like once we get to Big Top Pee Wee and beyond, the guard is so much higher on the things that he's willing to open up with.
He stopped cooperating.
He bailed. Bailed.
He was like, never mind. Not doing this anymore.
Which, could you imagine being a guy hired to direct a thing and you've got 40 hours of interview and now you're like about to get to the thing to wrap it up and your subject's just like, no, I'm good. Let's just not do this thing that you've probably spent a year and a half working on. Like,
But he was also facing his own mortality in that moment, and I gotta be honest, I'm gonna give anybody a pass in that moment to be as
for sure.
like, you know what I mean? Like I can't even imagine how hard it must have been. Like the fact that he didn't tell them and like tried to just make this a documentary as if he was just gonna go on for years afterwards. I can't even imagine how hard that is. And again, like he ultimately did give them permission, or we wouldn't be talking right now, right? So he did come around. I think it was a I don't know. I think they did a great job in spite of this director got just battered for God only knows how long by Pee Wee, but he did a beautiful job of being really, I don't know, kind to his legacy, I think, in the end.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because in the end, it's like, I have commented on this in the past. I've been, the legal stuff has happened. Is this really what I want the final words that I say, on camera to be? Like, I understand that, but it was very odd to have so much of it in the first half. And we watched that whole section of it, and I turned to my partner. I was like, he hasn't even commented for like the last hour on any of it. And then that pop-up of like, he decided to stop cooperating. I was like, there we go.
Yep.
That explains it. It's like, I've said the things I'm going to say on this. I don't want to keep, I don't know, it's weird because he didn't want to be a victim. He didn't want to be seen as like a victim or whatever. And I mean, I guess I could get that going there and being just like, oh, it's homophobia or it's cultural, whatever,
I know. He was so afraid, and from such a different, and how, I don't know about you guys, but one of the most heartbreaking parts of the whole thing for me was that his relationship with Guy, and how he just decided, I can't do that ever again. Like, what a sad, heartbreaking statement to just be like, at such a young age in your early 20s, to be like, nope, can't ever do that again. Like, and then when they only alluded to, well, he had this partner, but we never saw that person. He never spoke to that person. Like, I just feel like he must have really just pushed everything out of his heart besides being famous and performing. And God, that must have been tough to reconcile with as he was facing the end.
The photo of him hugging like Pee Wee, I'm like, well, there's the lifelong relationship. That's his
yes.
So this is going to sound like a shameless plug, and I don't mean it to. But we just,
I'm curious how you're getting to a shameless plug for my previous statement.
But we just released a video on the YouTube channel about the greatest sitcom finales of all time. And the Cheers finale is in there. Norm, who just passed away, he kind of has the last word of that series finale, which, if you don't know, it's like there's this whole big thing where Ted Danson's character might be able to run off with the love of his life that we met in the very first episode of the first season, and it doesn't work out. And Norm says essentially, like, you can't get married, you're already married to the bar, is like basically the sentiment that he says. Like, the thing you love more than anything is this place in this bar, and you'll never have space in your heart to love someone on that same level. And I do feel like there was a little bit of that too with Paul, like his love for Pee Wee and the career and what he wanted in his life outweighed any other human being's love. I think the person I felt the most for was his sister, who's also queer. And like the way that she had to sit there and be like, I know my brother's gay. Everybody that I know knows that my brother's gay. And we all are just watching him, like you said, Josh, like put himself back in the closet to succeed. And like, that has to be hard. It's hard for him, but it also has to be hard as a sibling that looks up to a brother and being like, you're not being yourself. And that really sucks to witness.
And his parents were supportive too, which was like touching. I did not think, given the way that he painted his father, I was like waiting for that, like that terrible moment. But they were supportive. And I think it spoke to the societal pressure that kept him so afraid to share that part of himself with the world. It's such a sad statement on, and then when with the 80s and all that, it was just, you knew where that was heading, and it was tough to watch. And it's such a sad statement,
Yeah, really. But all in all, really, really great doc. Do we have any last things that we haven't touched on that we want to bring up?
I'm just kind of random stuff. Like, it was neat to see V. Neal at the beginning, kind of doing his makeup. She did, famously designed Beetlejuice and a bunch of like Tim Burton. It was just neat to see her pop up. I was so glad when the documentary started, I was like, I hope they got Lynn Stewart before she died. As well. So I was so happy when she popped up, and then she was like throughout the documentary giving her thoughts. That was awesome. You know, there was also just some funny shit. Like, I'm gonna steal that line. I'm gonna let you let me go. Like, I thought that was hysterical. I was like, I wrote that down. I'm like, or let me run. I'm gonna let you let me run. That's one of those like perfect like like the RuPaul isms, you know, like that's none of, you know, I don't see how that's any of your business. I'm like, I'm gonna write that down. That's hilarious. Yeah, there were a lot of hair wig crimes, I will say. Like, we're all worried, you know, about these legal issues. I'm like, what's going on with his hair right now in some of the archive footage? But yeah, other than a fruitcake, that was pretty fucking fun.
Oh my God. I
was like,
how did
genius.
I never notice any of that? Like, I realized little me was really a sweet baby angel. She had no idea. So much.
So one of the so this is a quick look behind here comes the Matt Kelly Geekscape historian. Like, when Geekscape launched in 2005 or 2006, it was mostly a news website with articles and stuff. And then Jonathan was doing the Geekscape podcast. One of the first articles, and if you Google it, you'll probably find it. Someone was doing a weekly segment about queerness and pop culture. And one of their first articles was Pee Wee's Christmas special, the gayest thing ever broadcasted on television. And it was like breaking down like all of these things that if you were a straight child watching just went over your head. But like if you were like a 10-year-old kid who was even a little bit thinking that you might not be like the rest of the boys at school, you just got every weird little reference that was buried inside of it. Even just like with who the celebrity guests were, it's like, wow, this is a very queer heavy or queer icon heavy special. Like,
for sure. Yeah, it's like, if there's any question, like he was like, I always felt like I knew that he was, you know, queer, that he was one of ours. You know, it's like, yeah, obviously, look at his friends. I do have one more question, a very important question for the whole group. Which of you had the talking Pee Wee Herman doll? Did any of you?
Twice.
He has it. He slept with it last night. He's going to get it out of the bed. No,
my cousin of mine had it. And I was so jealous. But
I don't remember. I feel like my brother might have, but I don't remember.
Oh, we couldn't. We were poor. My rich cousin, she had one, and she like threw it around and just left it. And I was like, let me take it, and she just didn't even care about it. How she was with everything, you know. But when they brought that up, it's one of my notes. Talking Pee Wee doll. I wanted one so bad as a kid.
So the top of the Letterboxd review, when I went on Letterboxd to rate this, as I do when I watch anything, one of the top reviews grabbed my attention, which was, at one point in the special, they're panning across all of the collectibles that Pee Wee had. And I saw the yellow dinosaur that I used to have, and I started crying. And I was like, I know the exact dinosaur toy that they're talking about, because I also had that dinosaur toy. It was a yellow Tyrannosaurus Rex that had like super red lips. Like, they were like almost as if the dinosaur was wearing lipstick. It was a weird decision design wise, but I remember that toy clear as day. I knew exactly what figure they were talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Are we ever going to recover our necks from the nostalgic whiplash of this? God, just moment in it. I'm like,
No, it's a really well done doc that I think we can all agree recommend. You know, if people if someone just watched this whole spoiler free thing to decide if they should watch it, like, you should watch it. We've only talked for an hour and 3 minutes. There's still 3.5 hours of things to be discussed. But before we sign off, I want everyone to promote the stuff that they're doing. So, Josh, there's only one of you. We'll start with you.
All right. Well, you find me at Fright School and all the things. You know, we put out a weekly show about horror from a queer perspective. It's always a weird time. Come join us.
All right. How about the Jersey Ghouls?
Jacki.
Me? You?
See?
Me?
No,
Yep.
you.
We talk about horror. We sprinkle in the feminism. We don't sprinkle. We pour. We dump. We dump the feminism down. But yeah, a little bit of feminism, a little bit of fangirling, and just try to talk about everything within the horror sphere, whether it's movies or books or comics or just, the horror news, what is going on. We keep our finger on the pulse of horror sometimes. I don't know. And we release episodes every other Sunday.
And we are the Jersey Ghouls, y'all. The Jersey Ghouls.
Yes.
All right. And I just go to Geekscape. All my stuff is on Geekscape. I host too many shows and I make too much content.
I never know what to tag you when I go to tag you.
Same.
It's like Matt Kelly from all the things.
Yeah, spoiler alert. I also don't know what to tag when I do that. All right. Well, we will probably do many more of these. Hopefully you enjoyed this live panel discussion. And seriously, go watch the documentary. And stay tuned. Stay subscribed to Geekscape TV for more conversations like this one. Bye, everybody.